Happy Thursday, Seattle hockey fans. This is going to be an interesting episode of Locked On Kraken. We are going to get into games I have circled for December. We're going to return to last episode where we talk about, are we better? But I have to start with pressing news. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but the most pressing news about the Seattle Kraken in not just our circles, but national media is the Wennbergs versus BookTok. That and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your team every day. I got a nice new tumbler in the mail. Just celebrated last month in July, 3 years with the network. 2 of those years, of course, right here as your solo host of Locked On Kraken. Always a pleasure. I'm having a lot of fun. And I know I've gotten some comments in the past about background and design. You want to see more Kraken stuff. Now, I'm still working on some things. We've got the blue light over here, which is a deep sea blue. So everydayers and OGers, you know about my depths and how I like to make that a little bit of a running joke. But on the other side, here we go. There we go. Let's go Kraken. I'm getting some things together for you. I'm going to do the spacing and everything, but stay tuned if you are really into design and decor. And if you have any suggestions, drop them in the comments. I'm always open for it. I told you we have a lot to talk about on this episode, and we're going to start with something that honestly I have seen transpiring, but did not think was going to reach the heights that it did. In case you have missed it, Alex Wennberg is a very good-looking man. He is a very good-looking man. You have probably heard me say that on this podcast. You have also heard me say on this podcast more in relation to Nick Olczyk, who I also think is a good-looking man, dapper, dressing, that sometimes I have felt with Nick Olczyk that the commentary that he is a good-looking man consistently is a little bit of a distraction. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And so the reason I want to preface that is because you've probably heard me talk about this a little bit on the show, not in any detail, but just in passing when I talk about some of the players. When we talk about Turbo Tuesday or Alex Wennberg or the walk-up fits and things like that. Certainly publicly, I've had those conversations, and I definitely have them in group chats and other people who, we come to sports with a shared appreciation is how I'll put it. And although I do think some of how this story has transpired is ridiculous, I am also grateful that it gives me an opportunity to share my point of view. And I'm actually grateful that we have one of our watchers, our viewers and listeners who brought this to my attention. So shout out on YouTube, Green Olive 9927, the comment, "Hey Erica, can you do a video on Alex Wennberg BookTok drama? I want a Kraken female take on it." So I am a female, although I prefer to use woman. There are reasons for that maybe we'll get into. But yes, I am a woman. I do cover hockey and the Seattle Kraken. I am a cis woman, which basically just means that, well, you can look it up. I don't usually identify myself in that way, which I think in some ways is a little bit of a privilege point, but look that up because again, I don't want to make this about me or I honestly don't know that it matters, but here's the skinny for those who maybe aren't up to par. BookTok is terminology from the platform TikTok, social media platform. Now, some Seattle Kraken fans may remember that the Seattle Kraken social media, who I think do a fantastic job, I've talked about it. I loved how they used AI generated technology to do like a Yule log video with John Forsland's voice and like that's Krakenhocken, baby, like some of his punchlines. So I think the Seattle Kraken have shown as an organization that they're definitely on the forefront of utilizing technology and trends in social media to their benefit. And so BookTok is a part of that. I will be honest, I only know of BookTok through the Seattle Kraken and definitely most recently through the Seattle Kraken. But I do know that in hockey, and I became aware of this on the women's hockey side first, because again, I come from women's hockey. There are a lot of times that there are, whether it's on Reddit or other sub communities of hockey culture, where creative writers and fans will, whether it's video mashups or fantasy fiction, they will either use real players or sometimes fictitious players and kind of create these fantasies and like ships or like relationships. That's another kind of like YA, which is young adult literature. It's like when you put two names together, you ship them, like Benifer, so things like that, Ben Affleck and, well, he was married to two Jennifers. So anyway, but Ben, Jennifer, Benifer. That's an example of shipping something. And sometimes when you ship two people create fantasy fiction, or you'll see books where there's a storyline like Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley in the Harry Potter series were in a relationship. But sometimes people create fantasy or fan fiction to have Hermione and Harry get together, which honestly, from reading those books, I really thought that was the better relationship. I'm getting a little bit off topic here. Back to Alex Wennberg. So everywhere from the Seattle Times, ESPN, Insider, the Daily News. That's a New York newspaper. The Daily News. Was it the Daily News or was it the Washington or the New York Post? Honestly, it sounds more like the New York Post. Excuse me. So I don't think it was the Daily News. I'm pretty sure it was the New York Post. The New York, either way, a local New York paper has picked up the drama and the controversy around the Wennbergs, Alex and his wife, Felicia, and BookTok. I'm going to take us to, let's stay local, because, I love the work of Jeff Baker. And I do think that Jeff Baker actually did a pretty good breakdown of the BookTok controversy. I mean, we're talking NBC News, the Seattle Times, the New York Post. Like, so many outlets have now picked this up, which is just so wild to me on multiple levels. But Jeff Baker wrote a piece. So I want to go, because again, I want to ground you in probably voices that you have heard and people that actually know what's happening. I think that's best. So this is from yesterday. Kraken have learning moment after Alex Wennberg and wife condemn social media promotion. Now, I had seen Felicia's response and then I became aware of Alex's response. But if you want a little bit of a primer of what's going on, this way, check out Jeff Baker's article. Again, posted yesterday. For me, I know Jeff knows the team. I know that he knows also the social media coordinators. And so for me, I thought this was really anchored in some good things, including he describes, let me just put it this way. This is so awkward. I can't believe that I'm having this conversation on Locked on Kraken, but here we are. So the Kraken, we know that a lot of people were concerned about the Seattle Kraken being the name because of the term KRAK heads. I'm spelling things out. I know it sounds a little childish, but I'm choosing language very intentionally. And people thought that was going to be negative. Well, let me just say, when you get to a certain age, there are times where your back cracks just because you're old and you're rickety. Like I could crack my back. There it goes. Just popped it right now. When you are referring to someone that you are attracted to in an intimate way, let's just say that terminology of back cracking means something different. This is so wild. I mean, here we are, 2023, talking about backs and cracking and BookTok and Alex Wennberg and his amazing wife, who I thought did a great job. So anyway, you can put things together, Kraken, crack, back, BookTok, fan fiction. If you want to fill in the blanks, go read Jeff's article. And so while Felicia went to social media, she said, I know my husband's good looking. I embrace when other people compliment how good looking my husband is because he is good looking. And things have gone too far. And now Felicia and her husband feel that they are being harassed, that her husband is being harassed. Alex feels that he's being harassed. This is really important, okay? Harassment is not defined by the person making comments and their intent. Harassment is defined by when you make someone uncomfortable by saying something that is inappropriate to the situation. These are all things. We're all human and we have preferences and we have things that we like and that we don't like, and we like to appreciate certain people. And I think there's a realness about that, and there's a way that you can do it that's appropriate. We have gone way beyond that with Alex Wennberg. And to be honest, even before BookTok, I've started noticing that anytime that you notice someone from their appearance, there's always going to be people that maybe take it a little too far. I would consider myself personally conservative when it comes to these things. But I can appreciate the conversation. Things went too far with the Wennbergs. They did. And so my big takeaway here is, well, I mean, there's a few of them. There's a part of me, and I'm trying not to let this part prevail for too long, but I'm really, I find it interesting, let's say, how much attention this has gotten, including that this is controversial for the Wennbergs to stand up for themselves against harassment. I think it's interesting how much ink this has gotten, or how much, social media, internet attention this has gotten. And this happens to people every single day. Every single day. I don't know if I've ever shared this story here on Locked On Kraken, and honestly, because I find it extremely ridiculous and mildly embarrassing, but that's because of the culture that we've created. But I once was sexually harassed. Like, in my head, I think of it as I was sexually harassed while trying to cover a basketball game by a mascot. I was with a colleague of mine, and I was holding a handheld mic, and we were doing a few takes of me just, court behind me. I'm talking into the camera, my colleague shooting the video. And the mascot for this team came up to me, grabbed my face, and put my face into the mouth of the mascot, effectively, forcibly kissing me, which again is so ridiculous. Like, I really don't tell this story often. I'm trying to get more comfortable and let go of some of the shame that I have around this. But my face was grabbed against my will. And it's obviously a mascot. There's a human being in that. Now, I don't know how the person in the mascot suit identified, but that was extremely uncomfortable on so many levels for me. I'm trying to do my job. Someone grabs my face and puts it to their face. Like, I don't even have words. It's taken me years. This happened years ago. It's taken me years to feel more comfortable to talk about that. That's just a small example. And there are things that happen well beyond that are explicitly more egregious, disgusting, and dangerous and harmful than what I experienced. But that's all to say, I hope that what we take away from this is, again, the definition of harassment. Harassment is defined by someone being made uncomfortable. Sexual harassment is defined by someone being made uncomfortable by something that was said or done to them or in their presence. I'm uncomfortable that the Wennbergs are uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable that Felicia felt the need to say what she said. And I thought she did a great job. If you want to read some of her comments, again, I would go to Jeff Baker's article. He has a lot of that there. I thought she was really gracious in saying, can we dial this down? I know my husband is good looking. I am very proud that, we can share that together. I'm paraphrasing. These are not her. This is what I took from her. And it's a step too far. I don't mind people acknowledging that my husband is good looking or even saying things like that. Let's just be respectful. And for people to clap back at her, just kind of be aggressive towards her for saying that, to the point where her husband then had to step in, and he was much more, still, I think, very polite, but firm. This has to stop. It's gone too far. I don't want this. And now for people to be mad at Alex and Felicia, who are trying to protect their family, including their child, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous. So, thanks for the question and the opportunity to talk about this. I'm a little bit, again, shocked that I'm having this conversation, but here we are. Coming up next on Locked On Kraken, let's revisit the Are We Better episode. I'm going to go back to some comments on YouTube because I do think that you all have come up with some really interesting additional things that we should look at. And then finally, my games to watch for December. That's all coming up on this episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel, and you will get up to 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. You bet $20, you'll get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who's going to hit the first home run in any given matchup. All that on an app that is safe, it is secure, it is simple to use, and you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Head to FanDuel.com/lockedon for $200 in bonus bets, up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thanks again for coming to what is our clash between BookTok and the Wennbergs. I did my best to be concise, but also to be firm, just like the Wennbergs, because I think harassment of any kind is ridiculous. It's inappropriate. It has no place in hockey. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of work that we have to do. So if anything, although I do think this is an unfortunate situation, my hope, and I'm grateful for the question from a listener, a viewer, I do hope we continue to have these conversations because, again, the definition of harassment is not what the intent was. It's not even if the person who is effectively being harassed or being commented, I shouldn't have used air quotes there, excuse me. It's not even if the person who is receiving the harassment feels uncomfortable. It's if anyone hearing those comments or being witness to those comments feels it's inappropriate. And I feel this is inappropriate. And if someone's spouse, if someone's, life partner is telling you to slow your roll, be respectful. That's not your man. Be respectful. Alex Wennberg, and a lot of other members of the Seattle Kraken. Very good looking, very dapper. We've even talked about Dave Haxtell, very well put together. We can say that, and we can stop there. We don't need to say any more publicly or outside of the privacy of our own mind. Keep that to yourself. It's not, listen, you can't always, just keep that to yourself. Anyway, we're moving on. Are we a better team? That's the big question that we've been asking and that we will continue to ask. And I'm going to go back to a few of our everydayers and longtime listeners. But you all had some really great things to say. I'm so glad that that this was well received. But talking about the analysis is really interesting. But we have to also look at defensively what we lose when Daniel Sprong, Ryan Donato, Morgan Geeky, and I also talked about Martin Jones, but we've got 4 players that are leaving, and Carson Soucy. And so 3 forwards, a defenseman, and a goalie. And so, what about plus minus? What about things like save percentage, which again, that's where the Martin Jones versus Philip Grubauer conversation gets a little funky because listen, Martin Jones was getting results, but not always in the most clean fashion. And then we started to see Philip Grubauer get strong. But just some things that we need to think about. Listen, Ryan Donato, Daniel Sprong, and Morgan Geeky, according to Natural Stat Trick, they really only had 16 games played together. So it's a little hard to, again, I wanted to do the quick math on Tuesday's episode, and we'll dive deeper into this, but I want to try and find you some good metrics where I can show what individually each one of those players, and then also Carson Soucy, what they have been contributing defensively. I love defense. I also think defensive stats for most sports, but especially hockey, are a little clunky. And it's a modge podge of a lot of things that are not really hitting at the crux of at least what I want to talk about. So, but we've got to look at things like, high danger chances against and who was on the ice for those, things like that. So I've started to look at some of the numbers. We're going to keep crunching those numbers. But one thing I do want to just mention, and continue to ask questions. Are we better? How can we measure that we're better? And again, I feel like I've talked about this. Because I think it's something that Ryan Donato, that Ron Francis said. How will we know if the team is better? Well, we might not know for a few years out, but we're going to do our best to figure out and try and get to know if we are a better team. Looking at plus minus, Vince Dunn, Larson, Adam Larson, Yanni Gord, Brandon Tanev, and Jared McCann have the best. Those are the best plus minus that we saw for the Seattle Kraken last season. On the lower end, thus in the negative on the minus side, Jaden Schwartz, Andrei Burakovsky, and Alex Wennberg. So let's take a deeper dive. Plus minus is a little bit clunky. Shots blocked can be clunky sometimes. But I want to continue to have this conversation so we are in the best position possible to figure out, is this Seattle Kraken team really better? So stay tuned. Keep commenting. I mentioned that by November, I'd love us to be at 1,000. We're already at subscribers, that is on YouTube. We are already at 821 as of today, subscribers on YouTube. So keep the subs coming. As soon as we get to 1,000, we will be monetized. And that just gives me more opportunity to catch the Seattle Kraken on the road and to make my way to Climate Pledge Arena. Coming up next, some games that I have circled, and it goes into the conversation that we're going to have about prospect pools and the top prospect pools, where the Seattle Kraken lie in that, and why we have to kind of keep our finger on the pulse there as it comes to what we want to do down the road. That's coming up next on Locked On Kraken. We're going to close out today's show once again, taking a deep dive into the schedule. We're going to focus on December. But first, You got to know what's coming up for preseason. So, those watching on YouTube, I have the preseason schedule up for you for 23-24. For those listening on audio, don't worry, I've got you covered as well. We start off preseason Monday, September 25th, 6 p.m. against the Calgary Flames at Calgary. It's a split squad. So we also have on that same day, Monday, September 25th at 7 p.m. Pacific time, the Calgary Flames, half of the roster will be at Climate Pledge Arena. I think they're playing at Climate Pledge Arena, and then the other half will be in Calgary at Abbotsford Center. So then Thursday, September 28th, full squad going to be local and hosting the Vancouver Canucks, and then we'll host the Edmonton Oilers on Monday, October 7th. Monday, October 2nd at 7 p.m. Then the Seattle Kraken will hit the road for preseason, where they take on the Vancouver Canucks on October 4th, and on Friday, October 6th, the Edmonton Oilers. And I love a strong crossover. I hope you love a strong crossover. And I've been covering the Seattle Storm. Kia Nurse is on the Seattle Storm, and she also does some work in her off season with I believe it's TSN. Anyway, she does some broadcasting work for Canadian national broadcast. And my understanding is that she's going to stay in Seattle and hopes to catch up with her brother. You might have heard of some guy named Darnell Nurse, plays for Edmonton. She's going to try and catch up with her brother while she's in Seattle, while they're kind of on the same coast at the same time. Both of them originally, the Nurse family, including Sarah Nurse, originally from Hamilton, Ontario, which is on the East Coast. And so now both of them find themselves playing on the western coast of North America. So maybe a little crossover there. We'll see what happens. But games that I have circled. Let's see who the Kraken are playing. I'm going to pull this up for you if you're watching on YouTube. I have Chicago right there. We talked about that a little bit on last episode. But a few other teams, since we're speaking about Chicago, the New Jersey Devils, not only a team that their prospect pool is looking good, but they also had a really great season. Again, I talked about this last episode, but the Montreal Canadiens, a lot of people have been looking at them in their prospect pool. I've always been curious how the LA Kings are going to move some of their prospects up so that they're not just prospects and crushing it as prospects, but how do they start integrating them into their NHL roster? So that's the team that I have circled. So what are these dates? Well, we start off December on the 2nd, playing the Senators on the road, and then Montreal on the road. Then we've got 6 games at Climate Pledge Arena, starting with the Devils on December 7th, Tampa Bay Lightning on the 9th, the Minnesota Wild on the 10th. So that's a back-to-back. Definitely circling that. Regarding rest, Florida Panthers on the 12th. Chicago is a game I have circled on the 14th. And then, yes, circling the Kings on the 16th. I do not want 16 goals on the 16th. That was wild. Let's not do it again. We play LA also on the road, although it's just LA, on the 20th. And then we have Dallas on the 18th. So the 18th, December 18th, Dallas, December 20th, LA, December 23rd, we're playing Anaheim. So you have a little bit of an extended time in California. Anaheim is another team. They are bottom dwellers in the regular season, but are on the top when it comes to prospects. And so I'm very curious to see, similarly to LA, and also they're in our division, how they're going to start integrating some of their high prospects into their system. Close out playing Calgary on the road. We talked about them on the last episode. And then the Flyers. Don't really know too much really about that Flyers squad. So we might have to have Rachel Donner and Russ from Locked On Flyers to come and talk to us about that. But big games I'm circling. I'm just very curious about Chicago. And that's probably because, again, Ryan Donato is one of my favorite guys. I think he's a great guy. He's always fun to talk to, and he's a grinder. He works hard. He believes in his faith. So that's why he's always going to have a soft spot in my heart. So I'm always going to circle a Chicago game. LA, love those games also. big Blake Bolden fan, so always going to give her a shout when I can. But as far as the competition, competitiveness, what we're going to see on the ice, I think we're a little ways out from that. I want to first see what we're looking like in preseason. I want to then see what the roster is as constructed for the rest of the team. So we'll probably go back month by month over this schedule once we know a little bit more about us and eventually about our opponents. Thank you for listening to what started off as a rant and kind of an explanation of a subset of TikTok. I still think it's a little ridiculous. I don't engage in those things, certainly not publicly, and honestly not that much, just talking to friends and family. So it was an interesting experience to dive deeper into that, but I do think it's important. So thank you for your questions. If there's ever a topic that you want me to dive into, best way is to comment on YouTube, but also you can email lockedonkraken@gmail.com. That's really the best way to get a hold of me other than YouTube. But you can also follow me on social media at elindsay08. Pretty active there. That's on all platforms. We've got all kinds of different names and different platforms popping up, but you can find me at elindsay08, ELINDSAY08. And of course, you can follow the show at Locked on Kraken. Hey, this one, I always mean it, but given the topic, be kind to others. Be thoughtful, be kind, and respect people's boundaries, even if they're not boundaries that you hold for yourself, because you would want them to do the same. And be kind to yourself. That includes if something doesn't sit well with you, whether it's directed at you or someone saying something and doing something to someone else. Speak up. You won't regret it. We need to do more of that. Have a real conversation with each other. And it's absolutely okay to say when you're not comfortable. And yeah, people are clutch their pearls, but that's a them problem. I'm proud of you for standing up to yourself. Okay, go ahead and do it. I know you can. Keep doing it. We're going to be the better for it, and so will you. Find that peace of mind. All right, folks. Thank you as always for making Locked on Kraken a part of your daily destination. Ooh. Did I just come up with a new catchphrase? Daily destination. Yeah, I think we're using that. We're using that moving forward. I will catch you on the next episode. You know what to do. Hold fast, stay true. Let's go Kraken. And Firebirds Fridays. That's what we've got coming up on deck. Peace.